There is no difference between Democrats and Republicans because both parties are controlled by the same group of corporations. They gerrymander the district lines, they fund interest groups, they undermine our representation. They know exactly how you're going to vote before you even cast a ballot. It doesn't matter who ends up in office, they're just going to be bribed by lobbyists into doing whatever corporate America wants, and nothing changes. Corporations control the government. They spend the federal budget on their own agenda. They change laws and regulation to help corporate business. They make billions in tax loopholes and insider trading and government-funded contracts. Our government is made up of lobbyists and corporate representatives. Shadow banks make billions manipulating our financial system. They inflate the market, and when the economy crashes, they'll just bail out the rich and get away with it. Americans get screwed over, and the rich get richer. That's what we saw in 2008. And then we saw it in the 2020 crash. The pandemic bailout marked the sharpest increase of wealth on record ever for billionaires. And yet, the average American has never been poorer. Wealth inequality in the United States is worse than it was in France before the French Revolution. The top 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 92%. The reason why gas prices are so high is because foreign oil cartels are artificially inflating the price. They intentionally withhold supply to increase demand. Gas is expensive on purpose, for profit, and we can't do anything about it other than just to pay up. Because corporations have all the power. Instead of being self-reliant in our energy, instead of investing in America first, our government funded corporate oil for decades. It's also like the reason why medicine is so expensive is because our government doesn't regulate the pharmaceutical industry. Drug companies have a monopoly and people need insulin or they will die, so corporations get to exploit the price to whatever they want. Medicine costs hundreds of dollars more here. It costs a fraction in almost every other country. The UK, Australia, Canada. Before healthcare or insurance, the commercial price of medicine before any government intervention, hundreds of dollars more. And literally the only reason is because of corporate greed. And yet, our government still spends billions funding these drug companies because our government works for corporations. It's the same institutions that made billions starting the opioid epidemic. It's the same institutions that started the war on drugs and created the prison industrial complex. More than half of all Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. We work some of the most hours of any nation. We work more than even countries like Germany and Japan, and yet we have some of the worst benefits in healthcare, paid leave, vacation days, unemployment, and retirement. Real wages have stagnated for decades despite productivity increasing, and corporations have more rights than people. Cyclical poverty keeps millions of Americans from rising up. The only things that get done in this country are things that help the corporate agenda. Everything else is falling apart. Our education system is one of the worst in the world. What happens to a population that fails to teach the next generation? The school-to-prison pipeline is a sin to the future of our nation. We are mentally ill. There are mass shootings every day. Our government won't address homelessness because there is no profit to be made doing so. Almost every other issue we face today is the result of corporations having too much power in our government. We find ourselves endlessly fighting wars to secure the interests of those in power. We spend billions in private contracts. We fund the weapons of war. We fund freedom fighters and terrorists, whoever keeps our agenda, anything to secure corporate foreign investment. All while we are accelerating towards the end of the world. I'm not even usually an environmentalist. It's not just about temperature rise and sea level. What happens when crop yields start to decrease because the soil has deteriorated so much? Global famine? There will be wars for water. There will be an unimaginable migration crisis. Life will be miserable for the vast majority of humans on the planet. Food shortages are already coming. We are already seeing droughts and floods of historic proportion. I truly do not know how to describe the magnitude of environmental collapse that is going to happen. Yet, we watch as trillion-dollar corporations continue to destroy the planet for ever-increasing profits, almost completely unregulated, only to be held completely unaccountable. And nothing's going to change, because our government is run by corporations. The average American has effectively no representation at all. A politician can promise something to get into office and then once elected have lobbyists change their mind and decide not to do anything at all, and the system would be working properly. Because they are under no legal obligation to listen to us. They are not required to represent us faithfully, so they don't. A system that, by design, fails to ensure that the wishes of the people are acted upon by those who are elected. And nothing changes. No matter who we elect, nothing changes. Voting only exists to give the impression of legitimacy. The system has been corrupted. Corporations buy political influence to make money, and then they use that money to buy even more political influence. Whoever cheats the system the most ends up on top. Wealth and power snowballs into the hands of a few. If you're not exploiting every aspect, your competitor will, and they're going to outbuy you. Forget morals, forget human rights. The system demands profit above everything else, above human well-being. corporations have crushed American business and outsourced jobs to foreign countries with the lowest wages. They've gotten so big and powerful that they have a monopoly over almost everything. And now they have compromised our government for total control. Corporate America reaps the benefits of a system that they rigged. We have set things up to where you have almost no other choice but to buy from the system now. You can never vote for anything other than keeping those already in power on top. Both political parties completely unfaithful to real Americans. We are moving towards an oligarchic form of society where a small number of billionaires have obscene amounts of wealth and power, and nobody else can rise up because they've rigged the system. It's the most un-American arrangement. It's the exact opposite of American ideals, the exact opposite of democracy and freedom. It's ironic almost, if only the circumstances weren't so dire. We might disagree about everything else, about gun control, the police, and vaccines, but take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Look at the direction we're headed. I think most of us share common interest on some of the biggest issues. The corruption of our politicians, the blatant lack of democracy, the amount of power corporate America has, and the basic well-being of Americans. Liberals and Republicans demonize each other because the media wants us divided. Almost all news sources are controlled by the same small handful of corporations. Controversial figures like Donald Trump only divide us. They want us distracted and arguing about other issues. When they overturn Roe v. Wade, only for Joe Biden to come on a few days later and try and nullify the decision, I see straight through the show they put on. Yes, the other issues are also important, but I'm worried about food shortages after the upcoming recession, and everybody on TV wants to talk about how January 6th was a threat to our democracy. We don't have a democracy. What the hell are y'all talking about? I feel like I'm the only one who sees through it. It's all rhetoric. They want us to argue and divide each other. We need to stop being so violently angry about our other disagreements, because in the bigger picture, we are all in the same boat. We need to learn to work together. And that is such a basic and common sense statement, and yet I feel like everyone needs to hear it, because we've been tricked to hate each other. And the real crazy thing is, most people probably don't even disagree with half of the things that I've said so far. Almost everyone knows how bad things are, and nothing changes. When I bring this up to people, when I say things like, our government is controlled by corporations, almost nobody disagrees. How insane. Isn't it strange how many Americans are fed up with the government, and yet nothing changes? We have no real voice in how the country is run. We have no control over how our taxes are spent. Taxation without representation. The average American is being denied democracy, our inalienable rights. Why can't we have a government that works? Why can't we have a government that represents us faithfully? What a crazy idea, right? A government that represents the people. How can something be so common sense and yet so revolutionary? Because reality is so far removed from what is sensible. Why should a few dozen congressmen have the power to make laws for the entire nation? Congressmen of questionable allegiance. Shouldn't we have something even the slightest bit more democratic? It is so blatantly obvious that something is wrong. It is so apparent that something needs to change. The system needs to change. We need to reform the government. There is massive unrest in China right now. The banks are failing, similar to what's going to happen here in the US. People lost their entire life savings. The rich elites responsible for the crash have left the country while the government brutally suppresses protesters. Yet, American corporate media doesn't really talk about it much at all, because why would they? We live in a world where almost nobody benefits from the current system, and yet we let a small minority of people have all the power. It is so easy to imagine a world that is even the slightest bit better. There is no law of physics that say things must stay the way they are. And that's the most damning part of it all. All of the senseless violence, all of the human misery, all of the environmental destruction, completely unnecessary and avoidable. We have all the means to save the planet. If we took a fraction of the resources being exploited by the rich and spent it instead on noble causes, we could save the planet in an instant. If we agreed on even the broadest common ground, freedom, human rights, the most basic bare-boned level of human well-being, anti-war, anti-poverty, anti-environmental destruction, the world would be radically different. Like, overwhelmingly better. Like, what a relief humanity finally got its head on straight and kicked out the power-hungry 80-year-olds controlling the planet. The only thing that stops it from happening is ourselves. Maybe it's a dying breed of patriotism, but I wish my nation was strong. I wish we shook the corporate rot out of our government. I feel like I'm responsible as an American to give everything I can to make this nation better. This is supposed to be the greatest nation. We the people deserve better. Americans deserve better. We need to reform the government. I'm going to plant an idea in your head. Spread the idea of reforming the government. This is a list of demands. Pause now if you want to read. I'm not going to make this message any longer by reading them out. This list is not complete. Many of the ideas are vague, but if we want to be successful, we need a starting point. If I've convinced you, if I've truly convinced you, then spread the idea of reforming the government. Business as usual, but from now on, your goal should be to get as many people talking as you can about political reform. Just bring up the idea. Talk about it at work, start conversations with friends, bring it up when people start to talk about politics. Everyone needs to be talking about changing the system. It needs to be on the news. We need to get everyone's attention. Because once everyone is talking about change, change finally becomes a possibility. That is phase 1. That is step 0. Tell as many people as you can. I made this video to consolidate all of the ideas in one message. I'm not a politician. I'm not asking for your vote. I'm not asking for your money. I'm not a YouTuber or anything like that, but I'm asking that you share this video. Imagine if this went viral like anything else on social media. Download this video in case they take it down. Re-upload it somewhere else. Share it on your Facebook and Instagram. Put it in your bio. Text your group chats. Whatever you think you should do. We need to organize online. Here are some links for a few groups for people to join, but feel free to make your own. This idea should not be concentrated in one place. The idea is to organize and gather as many like-minded people together as possible. The words we are going to use to identify ourselves with are American political reform and anti-corporate. Once this movement is big enough, we can demand a nationwide vote to decide on reform. Now, the next word I'm going to say is very important, so listen carefully. Non-violence. We are not radicals. This movement will not be an opportunity for violence or destruction of our community. Anyone participating in violence is either acting unfaithfully or purposefully trying to smear our image. We are sensible Americans demanding our right to representation. We are here for democracy. We want our right to self-governance, free from corporate corruption. We are all Americans. We are all cogs in this machine. Everyone is on our side. Even the police, even those in office. If we want any chance for change, we need to be thinking rationally about what is best for this movement to succeed. If done right, I'm certain there will even be people high up in bureaucracy that will be sympathetic to our cause. We all need to work together if we want this to be successful. Imagine if we decided to boycott a company. Even if it was only an act of protest, I would do it in a heartbeat. Or imagine if there was a general strike. If that's what it takes, if I knew others were doing it with me, if there were protests across the US, if we all got together and said enough was enough, things would have to change. This movement is not left or right. We should not get hung up arguing amongst ourselves about partisan issues. This is about democracy. This is about human rights and environmentalism. Because once we reform the government, we can finally start to solve all of the other problems in this country. But the first step is to spread the idea of reforming the government. Maybe you think I'm being too naive. They're going to make this movement sound illegitimate. They're going to come up with some false narrative about how this movement is malicious and why you shouldn't support it. It's in their best interest to convince you that we have no hope and things should just stay the same. But what else do we have? The system is rigged. The planet is dying. I can't find much else that really matters. Our government has been corrupted completely. Sensible action is reform. Whenever you're ready to change the system, I'm ready. Because I am sick and tired of the way things are going, of the blatant and criminal abuse of power. Whenever you're ready to change the system, I'm ready. If we want any chance for our future, we need to start right now. But I will be damned if I spend my life complacent in a system that continues to deny me my rights, my freedoms, and my future. So I will sing with the salt of the earth that I did everything I could. I plan to do my part and to spread the idea of change. I hope to see the rest of you very soon.